Hello again, my Bible reading friends. I am here today again to do an introduction to a few of the epistles we are reading through right now for the Fall Bible Reading Challenge. I'm going to go through this very briefly. I've just been doing an introduction to each book as we go through it. I'm actually one day behind or a couple days behind because usually I like to post a video before we go into start a new book, and we already actually completed Philippians. It's only 4 chapters, so we read that yesterday, and today, September 17th, we are going to be reading Colossians if you have not already. And so I'm kind of late in giving the intro to Philippians, but today I'm going to do an introduction to Philippians, Colossians, and 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. So I kind of just give a brief overview and give some context. So Philippians was written, again, all of these were written by the Apostle Paul that we've been going through in 61 AD, as best as scholars and historians can figure. 61 AD, while he was imprisoned in Rome, and it was also about 10 years after the Church of Philippi was founded. The Church of Philippi, or the Philippian church, had a strong zeal for missions and consistently supported Paul's ministry. Paul had a closer bond of friendship with the Philippians than any other church. The main purpose of his letter to the Philippians was to thank them for the gift that they sent him. He also encouraged them to stay steadfast and united and warned against dangerous heresies. This may be the most beautiful letter written by Paul, filled with tenderness, warmth, and affection. Though Paul was writing from prison, he remained joyful and encouraged fellow believers to rejoice in the Lord in every circumstance. A common theme or bottom line throughout this epistle is on the subject of joy, which coincidentally, we right now in the Women of Prayer are going through the fruit of the Spirit, and this last Saturday we just had a little lesson on joy. True joy that stems from a genuine, deep relationship with God. And now a brief introduction to the book of Colossians, which we are reading today. This also was written by Paul while he was imprisoned in Rome about 61 AD. Colossae was a small town in the province of Asia about 100 miles east of Ephesus. And as an extension of Paul's 3-year ministry 100 miles east of Ephesus, and was likely founded by Epaphras as an extension of Paul's 3-year ministry in Ephesus. I'm seeing Ephesus and Epaphras and getting confused, getting mixed up. Sometime during Paul's imprisonment, Epaphras reached out to him for help in dealing with false teachings that were threatening the church at that time. Paul wrote this epistle to expose the false teaching and refute it, to instruct them in the truth, and to express his personal interest in the church, as well as to inspire them to promote love and unity. No other book in the New Testament more fully and accurately defends the universal lordship of Christ more thoroughly. My tongue is getting twisted today. It is combative in tone, abrupt in style, and bears close resemblance to the book of Ephesians in language and content. Over 70 of the 155 verses in Ephesians contain expressions echoed in Colossians. However, Colossians contains 28 words found nowhere else in Paul's writings and 34 found nowhere else in the entire New Testament. So just some interesting facts to note there. It's good to have context on all of these, what we're reading, because we can understand more thoroughly the context in which it was written, but all of these things that were written to the early church apply to us today as well, as many deal with relational things in the church, and they still apply to us today. So we can gain so much from reading these, but it helps to understand the context in which they were originally written. Okay, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Paul wrote 1st Thessalonians from Corinth on his second missionary journey in about 50 AD. So as we're going through these epistles, we've got to keep in mind that they are not in the Bible in chronological order of how they were written. The Church of Thessalonica was the second major church established by Paul on the European continent. It is evident through Paul's writings that many of these new believers had turned to God from idolatry, from worshiping other idols. Ethnic diversity marked the Thessalonian church. This letter, with the possible exception of Galatians, is believed to be the earliest preserved letter of Paul, and in fact, the first book of the New Testament to have been written. Though the Gospels describe earlier events, they weren't published in their final form until later on, after this. During his brief ministry in Athens, Paul was deeply concerned with how this infant church was holding up. He tried to return to them 2 times, but was hindered by the enemy. So instead, he sent Timothy to check on them. Timothy brought back a good report to Paul that the Thessalonians were thriving in their faith. And Paul, refreshed and relieved by the report from Timothy, he wrote 1 Thessalonians with thankfulness and gratitude over the growth of the church and their strong faith, despite his absence from them. He also exhorted them in several different matters, one of them being the resurrection from the dead, as this was a concern they had since several believers had passed away. Paul's response on this subject brought comfort and hope to those grieving the loss of loved ones. 2 Thessalonians was likely written just a few weeks after his first letter to them, 1 Thessalonians. They are similar in language, and the second coming is a central theme in both letters. He talks about signs of the Lord's return and encourages them to remain steadfast, patient amidst the adversities they faced. We can draw comfort, hope, and strength from these words as well. So God bless you, and let's keep reading. I will post another video soon going over the pastoral epistles of 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. So let's keep reading together. God bless you.